It is officially March Madness. Selection Sunday has passed. The brackets are set, locked and loaded, and we are in for one of the most anticipated March Madness tournaments on the women's and men's side that we have seen in recent history. Obviously, with conference realignment in college sports, a lot of these brackets have entered a bunch of different teams from the same conference. On the men's side, a record 14 teams from the SEC are in that tournament alone. But looking over at the women's side of the bracket, it's a little surprising with the one seeds. My biggest takeaway off the rip is USC was given a one seed in Spokane in quadrant 4 of the women's bracket over UConn, who got the 2 seed at 31-3. Now, obviously, Juju Watkins is the biggest commodity in women's college basketball, really in all of college basketball right now. However, I do look at that Spokane 4 part of the bracket. It does seem a little dicey having them at the 1 seed when UConn 31-3 dominated the Big East again. Probably have a better overall team than USC, but I'm not on the committee. If they feel like USC was the 1 seed, I mean, you got to go with what they decide. Ultimately, it's about just getting into the big dance. And when you win your division or win your conference, you're going to get in. And so that is how that cookie crumbles. But looking over this entire bracket, one of the biggest debates during the tournament was who should get the number 1 overall seed. Was it UCLA or was it South Carolina? There was a huge debate on who was deserving of that number 1 overall seed. UCLA ended up getting the number 1 overall seed. They're scheduled to play the winner of UC San Diego or Southern University in their first round. This is a team who really has been a sleeping giant in college sports from the women's basketball side of things. Coach Corey Close has done a great job putting this team in a situation to potentially win a national championship. Lauren Betts has been phenomenal as she is going to be a player of the year candidate, very deserving of the award if selected. She has shouldered a lot of the burden for this UCLA Bruins team, and they have excelled this season. I mean, a 30-2 record. It's been an amazing year for the Bruins, but also looking on the other side, if you look at South Carolina in that hectic SEC, they also went 30-3, and I would argue that their strength of competition was a lot more significant than a UCLA. Now, on the third area of the bracket, you have Texas, who went 31-3. They've been one of my favorite stories of the year. I mean, this is a team who not only has come into their first year of the SEC and has played in probably, I'd admit, the hardest conference in women's basketball, but they dominated it. And this is a team who has a point guard who's coming off an ACL tear 2 years ago, Harmon, who has been the catalyst for this team to be put in a situation where they're going to go to the Final Four in my eyes. But obviously, you have to pick a Final Four. And when I look across the ladder, I would probably say my Final Four would consist of UConn out of quadrant 4. I'm going to take UCLA out of quadrant 1. I'm going to take South Carolina out of quadrant 2. And ironically enough, this is going to be my sleeper. As much as I love Texas, TCU feels like it is their year. Haley Van List is playing great. They have a phenomenal graduate center who is dominating the boards. This is a TCU team that has completely switched life for themselves. And ultimately, looking at this quadrant 3 of the bracket, I do think they're the better basketball team than Texas. When I look at Texas and South Carolina, in USC, those two teams really they didn't look out with who their number 2 seeds were on their side of the bracket. I mean, having to deal with UConn and TCU to get to the Final Four, that's a monster to deal with. And so when I look at my Final Four, I'm finalizing it to be TCU, South Carolina, UCLA, and the University of Connecticut Huskies. Noel, who is your favorite heading into this year's March Madness? And do you have a Cinderella selection this year?
Man, always a good time talking some Final Four, talking some NCAA March Madness, man. Best time of the year. But I got UCLA definitely as my favorite. I think the dominance has been on display year long, no matter what opponent they went up against. All the schemes from the coaching staff, all the adjustments, incredible. Like you said, especially Lauren Betts down low. Yeah. Nobody wants to see her down low. Nobody wants to see her. I don't have a Cinderella team just yet, but I am keeping an eye on Oregon too. I like their style of play. I think they've been playing really good in the half court. Got a couple girls that can put up scoring titles real big. So looking forward to them.
I'd probably say my sleeper team going into this year would probably be Vanderbilt. They have a freshman put up 2 50-pointers this year. one of those teams that I feel like if they get hot at the right time, despite their playing your Oregon Ducks that you just mentioned. But I do think that matchup there, that 7-10 matchup, both those teams, I do think they can go for a run in March Madness. They're teams that if they can get hot, because the thing about March Madness, Noel, is like these are one-off games. You know, it's anybody's matchup. Who's hot on this day? Who can hit the most shots? So I definitely love that pick for your Cinderella, but I like Vanderbilt as mine. Moving on to the men's side of things. Now, there was a lot of controversy on the men's side of the bracket, really just having to do with UNC getting in as that final team in. I'm not going to lose too much sleep about that because ultimately they still have to play a San Diego State team to even really be into the thick of the tournament. The number one overall seed went to Auburn, who have been phenomenal this year. Shout out to Coach Bruce Pearl and his team. Duke rounds it out on the Eastern region, Florida on the West, and Houston on the Midwest region. The biggest teams on this bracket for the men's side that I'm really the most excited to see is that Auburn team. Auburn has been dominant all year. I've loved their guard play. They have like that perfect mix of youth and veteran leadership, which is why they've dominated the SEC. But I would probably say the team that's probably the most exciting to watch and everybody's tuned into is going to be the Duke Blue Devils. I mean, Cooper Flagg, Con Knuckle, Isaiah Evans. This is a team that their freshmen, they haven't seen some Duke freshmen that look this good since RJ Barrett, Zion, and Cam Reddish. This is the feeling I get from this team. But what makes this Duke team a little bit more special is they play with such a level of intensity. They can shoot the basketball well. They move the basketball really well. And so despite not only having just the NBA level talent, they have the upperclassmen, and it's a perfect mix of really everything you're looking for in a basketball team this March Madness. The Ken Palm rankings, they love Duke. Duke is one of their darlings, and you can see why. I think the biggest concern for the Duke Blue Devils this year is Cooper Flagg going to be able to play in the tournament? Obviously, we saw him roll his ankle. He is expected to participate in the tournament despite him being the consensus number one overall draft pick in this upcoming NBA draft. But Duke's run to the tournament, this could be the year where Duke does lift the trophy. One thing that was unexpected was Duke was set to play UConn, the former defending national champions, in the second round if they were to make it. But now they'll be in a tough matchup between either Mississippi State or Baylor, which is, you know, to be rewarded as a number one seed and to have to play a Baylor team in the second round. That's kind of, you know, something that you really don't want to see in terms of that potential upset bid in the tournament. Now, obviously, this year has been dominated, especially by the SEC in this tournament. But there's a lot of other teams who really going to have a case to not only shock some people, but make waves. I think the biggest Cinderella team in this year's bracket on the men's side for me would have to be Yale. I mean, Yale has been a team that's consistently found ways to get into the March Madness tournament. They play a great brand of basketball. And despite them being in the Ivy League, they're one of the better teams in college basketball. Now, one other program that I do feel like can go on a significant run and really be this year's Cinderella is, believe it or not, High Point University. They're going to play a juggernaut in Purdue out the gate, but that 4-13 matchup between High Point and Purdue, if High Point can shoot the basketball the way they did to make their way, to punch their ticket into the tournament, they are going to be a team that can be a lot scarier when that tournament begins, because the issue for a lot of these bigger teams versus these underseeded teams is they're playing with house money. They're expected to lose. And so they go out there with no regrets, no limitations, and play the freest basketball they can because they're not expected to win. And that's why you usually see so many Cinderella teams in March Madness. Noel, on the men's side of the bracket, which team do you like the most and who is your Cinderella?
I would say team I like the most. I really enjoy watching Alabama. Ever since last year's tournament, I've seen the development of Mark Sears, seen the development of Grant Nelson. I feel like those two in the pick and roll, those two on the fast break, love watching them play. Sears reminds me a lot of Jalen Brunson. Mm-hmm. That game winner he just hit against Auburn, incredible. I think they have great momentum coming into the tournament, even though they lost recently in their own tournament. But of course, also Duke. I mean, I think the entire sports world is kind of rooting for Cooper Flagg, which is weird, seeing that he's a Duke Blue Devil. Saw what happened with JJ Redick, saw what happened with Christian Laettner, saw what happened with Grayson Allen. So it's kind of breaking the seal a little bit on that end. But those two are my teams right there for sure in this March Madness tournament.
I love that. And I love the fact that you mentioned that. It's like Duke is like the villain every year. But it's like the last few years between the Zion year and this year, it's like Duke has like fans now because they have exciting players, and that usually happens. You want to see.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think we talked about this on a couple shows back that like the guys they hated before, like obviously they were awesome. JJ Redick, incredible college career. Grayson Allen was on an incredible stretch that freshman year when they went to the tournament. But I think it's because like Zion and Cooper Flag actually have like the potential to be like generational stars. So people aren't really wasting time hating. They're hoping they do well and develop because then it gets to the NBA. It's only going to help the product.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.